Oh shit, they got a little panda boy. Oh shit, Jack Black. Wait, what's that? Is that Ojama Yellow? Ojama Yellow. Yeah, shit. I can't remember what that card is called. He stole the potato. Ojama Yellow got fucked up with it. Oh, what are they doing together? Oh my god, this is like the greatest card artwork of all time. Alright everyone, welcome back to By the Box. We're doing episode 13 this time, Burning Nova and Empire of Scarlet. So jumping straight into Burning Nova, Gold Sphere, do we have anything this time? And yes sir, we do, Curse of Dragonfire. Curse of Dragonfire is a level 5 dragon type monster with 2000 attack. He's dark attribute despite the fact the man is literally made of fire. He has the effect that when he's normal summoned or special summoned, you can destroy a field spell. And then on a soft once per turn, you can fusion summon a fusion monster from your extra deck using himself and other cards you control as the materials. So essentially he's a polymerization on legs for any fusion monster that can use himself as a material. And every single time that's going to be either Gaia, the magical knight of dragons, or Sky Galloping Gaia, the latter of which actually appears in this box and is kind of going to be bundled with Curse of Dragonfire here. They are both super rares. So Curse of Dragonfire is an absolute integral part of Gaia. Gaia is currently, debatably, the best deck in the game, but at the very least, one of the best decks. And Gaia's whole gimmick is going into Gaia the Magical Knight of Dragons, who has a quick effect destruction, and is incredibly easy to bring out because of Gaia the Magical Knight, Curse of Dragonfire, and the field spell Galloping Gaia. All of these are bolstered by the skill the Dragon Knight's Path, a skill that adds so much consistency to the deck it is debatably once again the most consistent meta deck. The Dragon Knight's Path was part of a wave of consistency skills that Konami was trying out and then realized that they were way too good, such as Onomatopoeia or Demon's Resonance, and effectively all of them got nerfed, and they did nerf the Dragon Knight's Path as well. However, it didn't really lower the power level of the deck, it just changed the way it was being built, and the way it was being built post-nerf to the skill is honestly arguably better. The deck just got slower and ran more protective, disruptive cards, which also made the deck more toxic to go against. I might sound a little stubborn when talking about these cards because I honestly can't stand Gaia as a deck, but I can't deny its power level. With all that being said though, Curse of Dragonfire being an integral part of the deck that basically is a phenomenal combo piece to do their whole thing, this is not the way to get him whatsoever, and the same goes for Sky Galloping Gaia, because both of them are available in the Rise of Gaia structure deck, which also has Gaia the Magical Knight that is part of this combo, and of course Gaia the Magical Knight of Dragons, the whole point. It's to a point where I would say Gaia is the easiest to build sheer meta deck there is right now, because that structure deck contains basically everything that you would need, and other cards that you would need are free to play, such as Dark Flare Dragon or Gaia the Fierce Knight Origin. So yeah, you want these cards. This box isn't the way to do it, but they are good enough to be in Gold Sphere, so I mean, I don't know. If you pull one of the copies from them, then you might not have to get the structure deck another time or whatever, but yeah, this is not the way to go get them. So moving down to Silver Wall, I have one card and it's Gilasaurus. Gilasaurus is a level 3 Earth dinosaur monster with 1400 attack. He can special summon himself. He can just do it. Like he has no restrictions. He can just special summon himself. Despite not having any restrictions, he does have a caveat where if you activate that effect, then your opponent can special summon a monster from their graveyard. However, if you're using this on turn 1, then that doesn't apply because your opponent won't have anything in their graveyard. Unless it's Thunder Dragons and they pitch Thunder Dragon Dart to the graveyard, I guess. But, you know, outside of very rare and exclusive outliers, I mean, this card it's just amazing for that. It can just special summon itself, making it a phenomenal combo piece. Whether it be for a tribute summon or a rank 3 exceed or a level 6 synchro if you pair it with cards like Psychic Wielder. And that's where I've used this card in synchro toolbox type decks that use the psychic monsters that can special summon themselves if you control another level 3 monster. And basically you can put up a board of extra deck monsters without even taking up your normal summon. So Gilasaurus is really good in the TCG OCG Master Duel just because it has the effect of special summon itself, but it's a lot better in those formats because of link summoning, because it is an immediate link material. But in Duel Links, despite how good the card is, it still is waiting for the real thing that can optimize it the best. However, it has seen a widespread amount of play in a myriad of different decks, just depends on the format, depends on the meta, depends on what's going around. And a lot of the time it's just not necessary. Like take Magnet Warriors for example. This card, despite the fact that they would never need it,
it could fit in with Magnet Warriors really well, but that's the thing, they just don't need it. So the card is future-proofed if you ask me, and I think it's really good to begin with, but yeah, it's in Silver Wall because it isn't really applying to something that is much better than what it's been in. Moving down to Bronze Weapon, I have a few, and I'm going to start with the rare Batteryman Solar. Batteryman Solar is a level 4 light thunder type monster. He has 3 effects. The first one is when he's normal summoned or special summoned, you can send a thunder type monster from your deck to the graveyard. His second is that if a thunder monster is normal summoned or special summoned while he's on the field already, you get to special summon a Batteryman token. This token is a level 1 light thunder type with 0 attack and 0 defense. And then his last effect, which only really applies to the archetype, is that you can target a Batteryman effect monster you control or in your graveyard, and then his name becomes that Batteryman's name until the end phase. And all 3 of his effects have a hard once per turn. But realistically, he's only being used for those first 2 effects as of late in Thunder Dragons. See, Thunder Dragons lost their main combo starter in Aloof Lupine to the ban list that Thunder Dragons are all too familiar with. Aloof Lupine could banish up to 2 Thunder Dragon monsters to get your combos started, which was phenomenal for the deck. So when you compare Batteryman Solar to Aloof Lupine, it's nowhere near as good because Thunder Dragon's combos start more from banishing them than sending them to the graveyard. However, using this card can still start combos for Thunder Dragons because they all have effects that activate when they're banished. So if you have a way to banish the Thunder Dragon that you just sent to the graveyard with something like Chaos Dragon or Blackluster Soldier Envoy at the beginning, then this card is still really good. And again, he's kind of been delegated into sort of a necessary part of Thunder Dragon so that you have a normal summon that can get your combos going for a notoriously bricky deck. And then that second effect isn't half bad either. In my new Thunder Dragon build, I was running Ballista Squad, and that token could be a great target for Ballista Squad. But other Thunder Dragon decks have been using that token to go into Trishula, the Dragon of Icy Imprisonment. This is a fusion monster that only requires 3 monsters that you control. You just send him to the graveyard and you can special summon him. And this token can be used alongside that as well, so it's super easy to get 3 monsters on the field to go into Icy Imprisonment. And he is a lot better in Master Duel, TCG, OCG format of the game for Thunder Dragons. And in Duel Links, he's a little too slow, but he's still a decent combo starter for them. But Thunder Dragons have dwindled in power level so much because of their restrictions, and Batteryman Solar just isn't good enough to save them. But since, you know, they're Thunder Dragons, I'm going to put Batteryman Solar in Bronze Weapon. So continuing in Bronze Weapon, I have an ultra rare card this time, and it is Kycoo, the Ghost Destroyer. Kycoo is a level 4 spellcaster monster with 1800 attack, and he is Dark Attribute. He has 2 effects. One is when he inflicts battle damage to your opponent, you can target up to 2 monsters in their graveyard and banish them. And then his second effect is a passive one. While he's on the field, your opponent cannot banish cards from either player's graveyard. Both of these effects are pretty good, but that second one is really good. Especially lately, with Phantom Knights coming to the game, the ability to prevent your opponent from banishing cards is so good. See, Phantom Knights, who have just charged to tier 1 and charged to being the best deck in the game since their release, which was like 3 weeks ago, I think. Their whole thing being playing from the graveyard and banishing cards. This card is a straight counter to them, and with Phantom Knights coming out, it actually makes this card a little bit better. And then its first effect is good too, however, it's just too specific. I've talked about this before about effects that activate when you inflict battle damage to your opponent. It's namely cards like X-Saber Arabellum, who can achieve a really good effect in discarding a card from your opponent's hand, but he has to inflict battle damage to do it. And that is to say, this card could easily be disrupted or destroyed in some way before it would ever even get the chance to inflict battle damage to your opponent. And sometimes you just can't because he only has 1800 attack. But if you do land this effect, being able to remove from play 2 monsters from your opponent's graveyard is phenomenal, especially with Monster Reborn being in the game now. So Monster Reborn is another recent release that makes Kycoo even better. As it stands, Kycoo sees play in Dark Magician decks because they are one of the only decks that can bring him out without him taking up your normal summon, which is a big deal because you want your normal summon to be something extremely valuable, and Kycoo just isn't it. So Dark Magician is the only deck that plays him as of now, but Dark Magician is competitive and likely with the recent noose loosening ban list, they might see even more play. So yeah, Kycoo is a good card. Again, it's still waiting for, you know, something that can optimize it the best. I don't think I would have talked about it if it wasn't for Phantom Knights and Monster Reborn, but I think both of those things coming to the game have made this card better. Continuing in Bronze Weapon, I have another effect monster ultra rare spellcaster, and that's Magician of Faith. Magician of Faith is a level 1 spellcaster, 300 attack and a light attribute, and it's a flip effect monster. Red flags all over the place. Flip effect monsters are not good. So the reason flip effect monsters are not good is because they are just inherently slow. And that is to say, you have to set the monster and then pass to your opponent's turn and then hope that that monster doesn't leave the field in any way outside of battle. And then even if it is hit with an attack and it gets flipped face up, more often than not with flip effect monsters, you want that effect happening on your turn and not your opponent's. So in order to optimize a lot of flip effect monsters, it needs to be face down on the field for 2 whole turns, and it's just not gonna happen. So the only good flip effect monsters outside of like Subterrors or an archetype that actively works around these restrictions to make them faster are ones that have really good flip effects that you don't mind if they activate on your opponent's turn, and Magician of Faith is a good example of that. Its flip effect is to target a spell card in your graveyard and add it to your hand. That effect is so good. There is a card in the game called Magical Stone Evacuation that does the same thing, except you have to discard 2 cards, which is a huge cost. I mean, if you're going first, using the Magical Stone Evacuation alongside it, that's, you know, 3/4 of your opening hand. Now granted, you would need a target in the graveyard, which you wouldn't in that case scenario, but it's just to put into perspective how bad of a cost that is. But Magician of Faith is okay because it is just slower, but the effect of being able to add any spell card from your graveyard back to your hands, such as Monster Reborn, for example, yeah, it's an insanely good effect. And this is the second straight card where I can say Monster Reborn coming to the game just made it better. So it's a good card, but it would never really be necessary in any deck. But the point is, it can be splashed in a lot of decks and be a just fine and sometimes even really good card. So continuing in Bronze Weapon, I have one more card, and its criteria is not the criteria of any card I thought I would ever talk about in this series, but it's going to be the Vanilla Dinosaur Megalosmasher X. Level 4 water attribute with 2000 attack on a normal summon, but no effect, so why is it here? It's here because it's a dinosaur monster. You see, there is the Labyrinth Builder dinosaur decks, there are some Tech Genis variant dinosaur decks, and just various other dinosaur decks that range from 20 card builds to 30 card builds, and Megalosmasher X very consistently sees play in almost all of these builds. These decks use Miscellaneousaurus as an engine. He can bring out dinosaur monsters directly from the deck, as well as Baby Sarasaurus when it's destroyed, but the main reason it's Megalosmasher X is because of the trap card Survival's End. Survival's End is one of the strongest dinosaur cards. I think it's right up there with Miscellaneousaurus as one of the strongest dinosaur cards, and it's completely free to play, which is cool. It has the effect to destroy as many normal monsters on the field, and then special summon a level 4 or lower dinosaur type monster from your deck up to the number of cards that you destroyed. So if you destroyed 3 normal monsters, then you could special summon 3 dinosaurs from your deck. However, they are destroyed during the end phase, but if you pair that with Baby Sarasaurus that loves being destroyed by card effects, then you get to special summon another level 4 or lower dinosaur from your deck that isn't destroyed. And then End has this other effect where you can banish it from the graveyard to target a dinosaur type monster you control and 1 card your opponent controls and destroy them both. So basically Scrap Dragon's effect, but you can use it from the graveyard. And so Megalosmasher X is just a really good target for Miscellaneousaurus, for Baby Sarasaurus, for Survival's End, and these decks also use Paleozoic Marmella and Canadia, who can special summon themselves from the graveyard as normal monsters, and they are also cards that can proc Survival End's first effect. So Megalosmasher X is just the best card that fits this criteria for what this deck is trying to accomplish a lot of the time, which it does benefit from having vanilla monsters. And it's 2000 attack on a normal summon, so it could, in certain situations, finish out games as a beat stick. So, and this probably makes it the best vanilla level 4 lower monster in the game. And then, so going over some stray thoughts with this box, we have Gem Knight Lady Lapis Lazuli. Lady Lapis Lazuli is a fusion monster that, as you can see right here, is limited to 1. It has the effect that once per turn, you can send a Gem Knight monster from your main deck or your extra deck to the graveyard, and if you do, you to inflict 500 points of damage to your opponent for each special summoned monster on the field. Now, it does have the effect where it can only be special summoned once per turn, which is kind of used to prevent that from being used in FTKs. However, its effect can be copied by Gem Knight Master Diamond, and with that little combo, an extremely fierce and consistent FTK existed in this card's prime, and that's what got it limited to 1. And it is effectively now useless, but yeah, at one point it fueled a really nasty FTK deck. And that is another thing to say. I talked about a box earlier that had a lot of the Gem Knights. A few more of their extra deck monsters are in here, including Zirconia, who is a beast, as well as Amethyst and then Obsidian, and as well as their archetypal fusion cards. So you could maybe kind of make the argument that they could probably maybe pop up in Bronze Weapon, but I just don't think so. And other stray thoughts, we have some Fire Fist cards in here, as well as the start of Dulce, which they never finished. So, and now going over the poster boy, we have Elemental Hero Nova Master. Nova Master is a level 8 Fire Fusion Warrior monster. His materials are an Elemental Hero and any fire monster. He can only be fusion summoned. He can't be special summoned by other ways, which is usually a restriction to fusion monsters that are a little too good. But his effect is that if he destroys an opponent's monster by battle, then you get to draw a card. And like, don't get me wrong, that's a fine effect. Like, drawing cards is always good, but needing to destroy an opponent's monster to do it is a bit much to ask for, because it's just kind of like I was saying with Magician of Faith. You have to hope that this card doesn't get disrupted for its effect to ever resolve. You summon it, it eats a Book of Moon, a Treacherous Trap Hole, a Fiendish Chain, a Paleozoic Canadia. It doesn't matter. The card isn't going to be able to use that effect. And sometimes, I mean, let's say your opponent controls a Blue Eyes White Dragon. It only has 2600 attack, which like isn't that bad, but on a level 8, it's not that impressive. So yeah, the card is just not worth it, especially because you're giving up a ton of resources to get him on the field, more resources than drawing a card would even make up for. So the card is like honestly kind of trash, probably one of the worst poster boys I've talked about so far. So continuing now into Empire of Scarlet, I don't have anything in Gold Sphere. However, in Silver Wall, this just happens sometimes. I'm going to talk about a whole archetype in Silver Wall, and it's pretty obvious what it's going to be. It's going to be vampires. So vampires are an interesting archetype that during the release of this box and a little bit after it, they were an extremely strong deck. They eventually got power crept, and then as of recently saw new support, specifically in the form of Vampire Duke coming to the game. Vampire Duke kind of changed the whole way that vampires worked, but synergized with everything that was going on with the cards that are in here. So I'm going to talk about each one of them. So for starters, I want to go over Vampire Retainer and Vampire Familiar, as they are debatably the two best because they see play at either 2 or 3 copies in almost every single vampire deck. And that is because these cards are searchers and also combo extenders, both of them. So Vampire Retainer has the effect that if he's special summoned, you can pay 500 life points to add a vampire spell or trap from your deck to your hand. So that's great, getting to search any spell or trap card within the archetype. And then he also has another effect where if he's in your graveyard, you can send a vampire card from your hand or face up field to the graveyard to special summon him, but then he does banish himself when he leaves the field, and both of them are hard once per turns. However, they obviously work in tandem with each other, so it could be an instant search. And Vampire Familiar does the same exact thing, except he searches a vampire monster. So both of these cards are great, but then like what they're searching out, we have the home field advantage. Vampire Kingdom gives all the zombie monsters 500 attack, but then once per turn, when a card is sent from your opponent's deck to the graveyard, you can target a card on the field, send a dark vampire monster from your hand or deck to the graveyard, and if you do, you destroy that target. Now, how it synergizes with Retainer and Familiar is obvious, since you could send them directly from the deck to the graveyard. But in the modern vampire decks, it's mostly paired with Duke, who has the effect that you can send one type of card from your opponent's deck to the graveyard, a monster, spell, or trap, which paired with Vampire Kingdom would allow you to destroy a card. But that's certainly not all for the vampire cards in this deck. There's also Vampire Takeover that can activate Vampire Kingdom directly from the deck. And then it can also special summon a dark vampire monster from your graveyard, which once again synergizes with everything that's going on here, obviously. And then that brings me to the poster boy, Vampire Scarlet Scourge. So if he's normal summoned or special summoned, you can pay 1,000 life points to target a vampire monster in your graveyard, except another copy of himself. You special summon it, but it can't attack that turn, which for the deck's intensive purposes doesn't matter. And then at the end of the battle phase, if he destroyed any monsters by battle, you could special summon that monster to your side of the field. So Scarlet Scourge used to be a lot better, and he still sees play in vampire decks, usually at 1 copy if he does, but certain vampire decks are choosing not to run him at all, where he used to be played in every single one just because Duke is that much better. And not to mention him being level 6 can cause the deck to be a little brickier. And it's not just these cards, there's also Vampire's Desire, which sees consistent play in vampire decks. Vampire Vamp sees play, as well as Vampire's Domain. They're all very good. And that is to say, you could almost entirely build a vampire deck from this box. In fact, looking at this box makes me feel kind of guilty about the 9 decks to build during the half off gem sale video that I did, and I feel a little guilty that I didn't include vampires in that. It's an interesting deck, it's an interesting archetype. It has sort of a cult following in Duel Links. There's a lot of people that are big fans of vampires, and I see why. The deck is also predominantly focused on using life points as a resource, so they typically use skills like level tuning, where they need to get rid of some of their life points to gain advantage, so then they can use the skill, which, again, for their intensive purposes, is really good. It's kind of like Evil Eye in that vein. So yes, all in all, I'm putting the whole archetype in Silverwall, but they will be represented by the poster boy Scarlet Scourge. And now moving down to bronze weapon for Empire of Scarlet, I only have one, and it's a premier side deck card, and that is the normal counter trap card, Pulling the Rug. Pulling the Rug has the effect to negate the activation and effect of an effect monster whose effect activated when a monster was normal summoned, even itself, and destroy that effect monster. How many times can you say effect in one sentence? No, it's a really good card, obviously. It's a counter trap card, so it can't be responded to, and just that effect in general, as you can probably tell, is really good. And I'm sure some of you that have never heard of this card might be looking at it like, well, why isn't that played more? Why haven't I seen it before? And that's because while its effect is really great, it's just too situational. And that's what makes it a really good side deck card, and that kind of term situational applies to most side deck cards, because this card isn't going to be useful against every deck. So when you're using it against decks that just don't even have anything that it applies to, it's a completely dead card in your hand. But think about a card like Harpy Perfumer. Pulling the Rug can counter that very well. So in tournament format, which I know not a lot of people play, but if you do, it's a really good side deck card, and good enough as a side deck card to put in the categories, I believe, because again, what it is good against, it's really good against. And so I already talked about the poster boy. I don't really have any stray thoughts, except for the fact that a chunk of the Insector archetype appears in here, including the ultra rare Insector Centipede. There is also Hopper, and one of the better ones, an Insector Ladybug. However, it's kind of weird, and I couldn't really explain why, but Insectors have not had a good transition to Duel Links, and really just have never been able to get anything going. So it's an archetype that, especially when it runs copies of Centipede, that I can't really recommend anyone building, because Centipede isn't available in any other way, and you'd have to go through this box to get him. And the only situation where that would be ideal is if you're trying to build Insectors and Vampires, which, you know, I'm sure there's some people out there on the planet that's the combination of the two decks they really want to build, but I can't imagine it's super common. So that's gonna do it for this episode of Buy the Box. So this is interesting. The next main box, Gaia Genesis, does not have a mini box that goes with it. So here's what we're gonna do from this point on. Next episode, Gaia Genesis, will be the end of season 1. And so the next episode of Buy the Box is going to be a little different. I'm going to be going over Gaia Genesis, but then I'm going to be doing essentially an all-stars countdown. Not even countdown, but basically I'm going to up my categories again and put the best cards of all the cards that I've talked about in the categories in them to kind of rate where they are against each other. So all the best cards in all of these boxes I'm going to rank against each other, and that will be the end of season 1 of Buy the Box. And it is fitting because once we come back, we will be entering the synchro age of Duel Links, and we will kind of end it here at the fusion age. So I'm looking forward to that video. I think it's going to be kind of cool to do something like that. So it'll be a very unique episode of Buy the Box. Okay, well, I guess I get my daily login. Yeah, hell hell yeah, give me them dual orbs. So I thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in my next video.